This footage is from a panel having to do with Puerto Ricans living in Worcester, Massachusetts, United States, from the 1960s up to the 1980s. It is an account specifically with the living conditions and riots that had occurred in the Great Brook Valley Apartments and other institutionalized projects, ghettos, etc. I found this relevant to me because this backdrop is a prehistory to my story within the community, within hip-hop. This is how it went down.
So, my recollections come from being an outsider, although I had been a community organizer in Great Brook Valley, and saw the, and I'm searching for the word because, we built a ghetto. We took veterans housing and converted it into a neighborhood of people, mostly Latinos, although there were some white and black families that had lived there for multiple generations, and some still do. My recollection is, and it boiled up with kids hanging out because there was no place to go. What bugged me was a little thing where people were arrested for sitting on their front stairs having a beer. And they were arrested for drinking in a public place. It's like, if I'm drinking on my front porch, no one's gonna stop and arrest me for drinking in a public place. There was, in my eyes, there was no difference. But the tensions boiled over, and there was a melee. The kids, several people got arrested. There was a lot of protesting and verbal protesting. It wasn't really bad. There were dumpster fires, and I think the police came into the valley first because the fire department came in to put out the dumpster fires, and they were pelted with rocks from some of the young people. So that's when the police showed up. But subsequent to that, so the manager, city manager Francis McGrath at the time, appointed I think it was a 15-member commission to examine what was going on in GPV. After that, the young man was arrested and killed. And the reports were that this was a very personal thing between the police officer, who, by the way, was 21, with very little training and given a gun. And it involved the prisoner who was handcuffed in the back seat taunting the 21-year-old about his wife. And when you go to work, I'm at your house, basically. I go over your house and, your wife and I are having, a relationship, and you're out working and I'm there, and it got a little more graphic. He slammed on the brakes, turned around, pulled out his service revolver, point blank, and shot the gentleman in the head. That's what precipitated the riots the next night. I remember standing on a hill because we were called down. I remember standing on the hill, row of policemen below us. The smell of, I still can see it today in my mind's eye. Tear gas in the air, hot summer night, the policemen banging on their shields with batons, and they finally brought control. I think they brought in the state police. There may have been state police helicopters flying overhead.
National Guard.
Was it National Guard?
Yes, it was.
And subsequent to that, we had several hearings. One of the things I wrote, I was reading my report, and the report should serve as an indictment of the leadership of the Worcester Housing Authority, an administration that has shown a callous disregard for humanity and human suffering. They really did not care what was going on in Great Brook Valley. It was isolated. You were right. The fact that the buses dropped people off at the beginning of the valley, and if you lived at the back, I mean, that's a mile, mile and a half walk in the hot summer with groceries, or in the winter through snow. That's just not right. We talked about inequity during the meetings of the commission. We talked about how to get people involved in the community, in voter registration, in getting out and vote. And the city clerk of the city of Worcester, Robert O'Keefe, who makes Donald Trump look like a nice man,
He does.
pulled the voting precinct out of Great Brook Valley to make sure that people in the valley had to go someplace else, and they moved it to Clark Street School. I was thinking, I forget if it was, I think it was Clark Street, maybe St. Nicholas Ave, which affected voting patterns even more. So that was part of the city response to what went on. But I think we've come a long way since those days. Although I think Sonia is still looked upon with fear, in admiration, because she was out there. That's 40 years ago. This woman stood up 40 years ago, sometimes by herself. Sometimes she had a crowd. Sometimes the crowd was angry, because Sonia is a very, very powerful speaker. And she had a message. And that message ultimately, I think, was heard. But that's my recollection of the night. And I think we made progress because of that. We have to put this all in context. This was 10 years after the Kerner Commission on neighborhood violence in America. But Worcester always tended to lag behind. So what was going on in some cities in the 60s happened in Worcester in the 70s.
Thank you. Let's hear from George, and then I would love to pose a question for each of the panelists.
Okay. Before I tell you my experience of during those particular riots, let me say that what happened at Great Brook Valley was not a coincidence. This was a build-up of the effects of systematic discrimination was going around the country. What happened in Great Brook Valley on that day could have happened at any place in the city of Worcester, because there was not the only place that we were pushed to the corner. It could have happened, and it did happen. Actually, it did happen. We have the students revolting because of the riots in our high school, which at a later time will, in the next session, we'll show you some clips of that. What happened, the violation of civil rights of the 60s, by mainly suffered by the black communities, then we picked up on that, and we were part of this systematic discriminatory policies and practices by government. And when the government have this in place, then people follow to that. The discriminators here in Worcester, we identify those individuals, these people who were like Ronnie and some other was, I'm sorry to say, mention those names. But this was a build-up that it did happen. It had to happen somewhere. And the officer who pulled the trigger, as a matter of fact, was Hispanic too. So it was not, there was the reaction of police of what Sonia described here, was the lack of attention, the lack of police, the lack of services and so forth. So it happens that this individual was dressed in police uniform, was Hispanic. And the incident between the two individuals was something that was used. Basically, this is the time because it's a police officer. Was not much against the individual or what happened. The two individuals was this is it. This is police brutality. We're going to resist, and this is what erupted these riots. Now, the riots. That incident happened. That nobody knew what was going on in the valley or in the city. It was confusion. At the moment, it was confusion. Rumors of one thing, what another thing. The only thing they knew was something bad happened. They killed an officer. They killed an individual. They killed one of us. Not even thinking that the other individual was Hispanic. It just police killed one of us, one of our Hispanic members of the community. That confusion brings people together. Sonia, what's going on? What are we going to do? So the plan was to revolt and protest the building during the day, preparing for an action in the evening. When the evening came up, then gasoline, bottles of gasoline thrown, incendiary trash cans, and that erupted. They sent police. They sent the police. The police was stoned. They didn't want them in there. The first night, they tried to take order, but the resistance was too big. They sent the fire department. They stormed. At the end, the police department and the fire department, they decided not to intervene any longer. All cruisers were pulled out outside. All fire trucks were pulled out. They said, let it go. Let it happen. They didn't go in, and that. So, and the daytime was mainly was planning what to do in the evening. The evening was war. It was absolutely war. Now, as a reporter, I was following up. What was happening. I tried to get in, as they say, the entrance of Great Brook Valley on both ends were blocked by police, but they were not inside anymore. They were blocked. Nobody was allowed to go in. Only residents would show that they live in there. Nobody else. As a reporter, known by the community, because I was doing Spanish news at the time, so I was known. I went in the daytime and talked to Sonia and talked to some other individuals, and I told them, I said, look, you need to use the news services to let the community, to let the government, to let the country know what's going on in here and why is that revolting. With that in mind, they said, yes, we need to do that. You come in, Judge. You coming in, but you're the only one that is coming in. So I was prepared with cameramen. Right around 6 p.m., Sonia and another group, they got together. I got in, talked to the small group who they actually were going to escort me through the valley, in the evening. They needed to escort me because not everybody on the windows and on the streets may not know that I was covering the news and benefit of what was happening. So they saw from me, and I'm going in with the camera, talking to different people, explaining and saying why this is happening, why the government should stop this unfair treatment, this discrimination. That report that I did, notice that news, when a station covers news, or radio station or television covers news, they share those with other sources, because they're not here from part of the country. So my report was immediately, there was national television and radio station eager to cover this story. So being the only reporter who was allowed to go in, my report made the national news all over, telling what actually happened.
Great, thank you so much. We appreciate that reporting because we still have those records today.
Casa Borinquen of Worcester is going to be raising the Puerto Rican flag. It's an annual event from 5 to 6. Please show up because it's important for our presence to be known and acknowledged. And following that, there's going to be a documentary which is called Huracan, which is a documentary on the 119 years of oppression and colonialism and what the people of Puerto Rico on the island and here have been fighting against. So that's going to be at 7 p.m. at Christian Community Church, 108 Beacon Street. So please join us if you want to talk about being supportive, talking about learning, and just mentioning what Carmen has said. This is how we need to teach our young people our history. We have a history. We need to teach our people, not only our young people, but everybody needs to know that we matter, that we value, we have made contributions. So please join us.
And we have a short news clip from George Jorge. If you wish, you can stay and watch.
Yeah, just bear with us.
Is that George? He says that's George.
So we're going to have Leon make some announcements and also give the thanks for being here.
Bear with us. This is ready to go. And what this is going to show is actual news on resistance for the Hispanic community to put a center in Bushka. So you're going to see the resistance and what happened on this particular case. Go ahead. Lesson, please, quiet. It's in Spanish.
Ya que él no cree mucho en las agencias de protección.
¿Qué problemas tiene un hispano para conseguir empleo?
No, los hispanos, el primer problema de los hispanos aquí es el idioma. Tienen un problema bien grande con el idioma. Ese es el problema principal.
Fuera del idioma, ¿qué otro problema afecta al hispano para conseguir empleo?
Los hispanos tienen el problema de la discriminación.
I'm sorry, this is another issue. Of discrimination in the area of employment. That's not the one it was intended to play, but bear with us. He's going to throw it. Is the next one. Father Paparo, you're on the next one.
Then, as we fix the technical part, I'm Leo Negron Cruz, also from the Latino History Project. I want to thank all of you for being here with us tonight. We want to invite you to October 13. Saturday is we have two events happening at the same time, the Latino Family Day, and we also have another movement panel. It's about youth movements, talking about the Puerto Rican youth movement in the 70s and today. We welcome all of you. At the Family Day, we have events for children and for adults. Then from 12 to 4 here at the museum. I know you before the team, as Marisa pointed out, tomorrow is the flag raising at City Hall at 5 p.m. It's a Puerto Rican flag raising, and then at 7, there's a show of the movie Huracan and Nación en Resistencia, and then at 7 at 108 Beacon Street, or the Christian Community Church here in Worcester. And then today we have here with us the creative producer of the video of the movie, Rosa Emanuele, and the director, Gonzalo Mamassini. Then, back here. And also, before I wrap this up, then just to thank the panelists, Paul, Carmen, Sonia, George, Marilyn, and Justin for their presentation today. It was very informative, as we hope that will be. I invite you to at the exhibit here in this room and outside. Also, as you exit today, part of the funding, and I need to thank them. One of them is Mass Humanities. They gave us money to put all this programming together, and part of the requirements is that we need to get evaluations from you. That if you are kind to us, in that way we will go back for more money for next year and complete an evaluation about today's event. We will be very grateful. Then at the table here, then make sure that you get one there. You look easy, but it's very simple to answer. Then thank you very much to all of you, and then we leave it to the creative. We are instrumental. Thank you. And thank you to Marisa and Fernando for facilitating.
La diócesis hispana de Worcester recibió del obispo Flanagan el edificio donde funcionaba la escuela Sagrado Corazón en la Great Street. El comentario común en los últimos días ha sido: por fin tenemos nuestro propio hogar comunitario. Hoy, en una entrevista, el padre Bafaro dijo con mucha alegría a su comunidad lo que estas frases quieren decir.
Esta frase revela un deseo por parte de todo el pueblo, la comunidad hispana, para tener su propio lugar, su propio local, y ojalá que pueda contestar a las necesidades, particularmente de tener su casa propia.
I'm sorry we have the technical difficulties that in our